that's not Horsemanship blog. What are we doing? Welcome to the Remarks Show. There we go. 1 week off, and I've
One
fallen
week
apart.
off. 1 week off. And look what
My
happened.
brain went back to the vlog, man.
That was
I
fun. I
I,
need to
I did the vlog intro probably more times than I've done the Remarks Show intro.
several times.
Several, well, yeah, probably not more, but the recesses of the brain jumped back there. So
Well, tell me how the fishing went after all.
it was fun. It was fun. It wasn't. We weren't in the right season. This wasn't a we planned to go fishing. The trip planned around that was here was our trip and let's go fishing. So it was sand dab season, which sand dabs are like the bottom feeders and crabs. So we got a bunch of little fish. But it was fun because you like had 6 hooks out there and you could catch like 4 at a time. And then we went and pulled the crab pots and that was exciting, I guess. I actually slept through half the crab pots. I'm like, I'm gonna go take a nap. I didn't need to get up at 3:30 for this, so I was sleeping in the hole while Levi was pulling up crab pots with the crew.
That's
Yeah,
pretty amazing that you can sleep on the boat, considering you're not on a boat very often.
yeah. I was wondering. I mean, I know I've been on boats before, and it hasn't bothered me. I was wondering how Levi would do with it, but yeah, I slept like a baby. It was great. Let's go live on a boat.
I know.
Yeah,
Sleep, sleep, sleep.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Awesome. Well, let's say good morning to our friends. Susan, good morning. How's the weather? It's got to be getting better, right? Corey, good morning. Chelsea, good morning. I didn't do an Instagram post or reminder post or anything. So, yeah, we'll see who shows up today. Sarah, good morning.
the weather getting better. I was in California, so it's kind of slick. But I think we got about 10 inches here the other day, but like not that far away in the middle of Wisconsin, probably smack dab in the middle. They got
Oh,
30 inches
yeah.
in one night. That's just insane. So, but
I know.
it'll be 70 on Saturdays, so most of it will go away. Is that at least I came back to snow that feels like spring is coming as opposed to snow that feels like the dead of winter.
Yeah, totally. I heard the UP got like my mom was sending me some pictures that like, to the top of people's sliding glass doors. They couldn't get out. Like it was record deal.
Yeah.
So yeah, Julie. It's pretty fun. Good morning. Eva, good morning. It's warming up in Minnesota, Diane says. Good, 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 good. Tomorrow is the first day of
Spring.
yay. So very excited about that. Uh let's see. So Michael's back from vacation. Welcome
What'd you
back.
talk about last week? Let's
Oh,
review the show. I didn't
right.
listen to it.
I don't even know. But remember,
Was
I just got
was someone on, or did you just
oh,
gab for a half hour? I didn't give her much warning, guys. I'm sorry. I just
like the day before, like, I want to go fishing tomorrow. Well, what are you gonna say? Of course, go fishing. But
yeah,
I could have done the show, Wednesday because I was traveling, and
yeah.
so anyway, I was gonna pop in for 10 minutes and it ended up being 53 minutes.
You talked to yourself for 53 minutes. Wow, that's a skill.
I don't know. It's a skill. You guys watch last week's show and tell me what you think. So I it was finally snowman snow. Oh yeah, that's what Eva says. So I went to the Buck Clinic last weekend.
Yeah.
So first clinic of the season, always, a big deal. Although, Buck had two bridle horses with him. So she talked to her people for 53 minutes. Yeah, exactly.
No, I know. I was joking.
Diane, thank you. Thank you guys. So I'll tell you about that. And I got a little blog up. So emmadailyclimbblog.com. You can read a little bit there. I got that up yesterday. I just wanted to kind of note it for the record. And if you're horsemanship insiders, you can go to Basecamp Bulletin. And it was really fun, Michael, to vlog it kind of the way, with the freedom that I used to have. So, but it always peters out a little bit. I will finish it instead of basically doing the supercut this week. I thought, well, I'll finish that, and it'll be long. I mean, because I think it's going to be like 45 minutes long or something if I put all the days together. But Michael, how towards the end you're just kind of like quieter and things have gone in. So, and side note, Buck did a little um, thing for the Pathfinders. So I will get that up as well. Tomorrow it will be 83 here.
Iowa.
83? It was a blizzard Sunday night and the highways were closed. That's crazy. What do you do for the horses? My horses were sweating on Monday.
Wild and crazy things. So we've got around 40 horses here. And Steph was telling me last night, I haven't talked to Michelle, who was firsthand on the scene, but there were like 10 horses that ripped their blankets that night. Two of them fully crawled out of their blankets. So I don't know what was going on, if we had the abominable snowman coming through in the storm, or if it was just the storm, because it was super windy and the whole 9 yards. Sounds like similar to Iowa. Um, who knows? Like, okay, so the belly band straps, not belly band, but the straps that cross, fully ripped off Brody's blanket. Like, fully disappeared. Not the little buckle piece broke. Like the webbing sewn onto, like, all the stitching. My mom's like, what, was someone out there with a seam ripper? How does this happen? Because, like, the straps are not torn, the blanket is not torn, it's just fully sheared off. Like, what in the world was going on that many horses, like, blanket straps are broken and blankets, like, were they blowing up over the horse's hind end and getting up over their heads around their like, who the heck knows? Oh,
That's why.
weird occurrences. Like, seriously, the horse gets injured and you go around the paddock going, what in the world did this? Like, how did they do this to themselves? It was like that, except for the blankets were the carnage. All the horses, thankfully, were fine, but kind of
$5,000
wild.
blankets
Yeah,
later.
exactly. Yeah.
Eva Moonshine did that to his too. That's so wild. Well, Gary has told me a couple times, that Oklahoma wind has peeled the blanket off forward.
That might be what it is, because their butts are to the wind. Makes
Mm,
sense. I'll have to look, if it's all the blankets that just had the little, if it's clipped together under their tail to where it can catch and go over as opposed to around their legs.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hopefully they can be repaired. It's kind of a bad time to have your blanket, messed up, but I've
Well, I
had
don't know. They're, if we don't need them much yet this season, they're going to be packaged up and going to the cleaner, and she can repair them. So maybe it's a good time. But
hmm I just hate
anyway,
having like for the last 4 weeks or whatever. That's the son of a bitch. Yeah, well, we had a little spring adventure here yesterday. So I was gone for the a weekend, and so I was in the process of turning all mine out for their after being in jail, because I just leave mine in their paddocks, stalls and paddocks while I'm gone, so that nobody has to bother with my horses other than to clean, feed, and water. So I put Feather, Prim, and Zorro out yesterday, and had gone about my business. I was in the office and I hear Zorro just having a meltdown. I'm like, oh God, because sometimes Prim and Feather will jump out. And usually then they're just right on the road. I can see them from the kitchen, and they'll come up to the house, or I'll go get them or whatever. And Zorro, so I go out there and Zorro's like, Mom, and I can't see them. And sometimes they go into the forest and don't and leave him behind for whatever reason. They're very energetic together. And so he'll call him down to, be like, come on. And then sometimes they come out of the forest. So I'm like, where? And he keeps looking up behind the coverall. And then he's just being weird. And then he goes running up the back, behind the coveralls like this. And they do go up and down that, but he was like, he crawled up that, and I'm like, oh, geez. So I get a halter, go to the back of the property because I'm like, well, I'm just going to walk the back fence line to check it while I'm up here, and figuring that they would be at the neighbors, behind me. That had to be where they were, because by the time that usually they notice I'm walking around out there, they'll come say hi. Anyway, Michael, there is a giant oak tree that's down. So it took down a 20-foot swath
Oh,
of,
jeez.
of the back fence. So there's no back fence. I had 5 horses out the day before, the whole day, you
Oh
know.
my gosh.
And it's like, you just kind of probably should check that fence line. I mean, there's years and years and years that have gone by, but I mean, it was down.
Well,
And so I'm like, okay. So I get Zorro in, walk around, by the house, head down. There's a road that goes along our property, you guys, but it's just for, like 6 houses. So it's not that busy, middle of the day. I go walking up there again, thinking that they're on the property behind us. And so all of a sudden I hear from far away on the opposite side, Prim calling.
oh
And
my goodness.
oh no. So anyway, I go walking up the hill. It's less stressful just because there's like timberland and properties. So long as I have my back to Gooseneck, the main road there, um, then it's like, you know, I'm less stressed out about them, being out in the forest. Although
Mhm.
in the end, that would not be the best overall, but they'd have to be pretty lost, I feel like. The problem is those two being together, they're pretty happy to be together. But Prim was not happy at this point. And so I get a little farther up the hill, kind of past these. We have a 10-acre piece, and our neighbors have a 10-acre piece, and there's another couple 10 acres, right? So they were kitty corner at that point to the 10-acre, but far. And so anyway, I'm like, Prim, and they come like galloping around, pop out on the road, and they're looking at me, and they are just a sweaty mess, and they're like 30 or 40 feet ahead, maybe a little bit more than that. And they turn away from me. I'm like, you guys, I mean, where are you going to go? And so Prim turns around and looks at me. And I'm like, hello. And I have the halters. She stops, she thinks, and meanwhile, Feather's like pointed away. And pretty soon they connect the dots, and then they're like, like, are you guys lost? So anyway, all's well that ends well, but that could have been really not ideal, especially if I was home, in town, because it's all fine when it's me. And like some strangers are out there, they're just not be coming up and being like, oh,
So it was just the two of them, or it was, you
there
said
was
there were like five.
no, that was the day before. They were out all day. They came in. No problem. I had no
Oh,
idea. Right. But it was Feather and Prim who decided to leave because I put them out with Zorro. Zorro wouldn't go over the fence. He's like, "Ah, hell no, I'm not. There's sticks and shit. He's like, no way.
there are 1,000 small fences beyond this big one. I'm not going to climb over them all.
He was just like, forget it. The good part is it was really flattened, so they could pick their way through nothing was going to cut their legs. I was like, so they were a sweaty mess, but not a scratch on them.
No.
Knock on wood, thank God. But I just keep thinking, it's like, what am I going to do? Because the horses are one way with me again. And, like what? And I was thinking, Michael, you paint them on like a glove.
Uh,
That's the dream. Like, that's the goal. But then what do you do after that? Especially, I mean, that is what I'm chasing. I don't I don't really need somebody else to, except for like, you think of the taming thing, but I wonder, I've got to think about how I want to test that
Yeah.
or improve it, or and to what degree do I want to? So anyway, that's my adventure story, and I bring them. It was fun. I'll put a little video of me walking along with those two hanging on the. I think here's the thing. In the end, it was a bonding experience. Again, all's well that ends well. Could have been not ideal, but in the end, them coming to find me hiking them back to the house, into their stalls, water, a little, give them their supplements right then. It's like, good job, guys. Maybe don't go off the property. What's the? I mean, it's not rocket science. So anyway, it would be interesting to see if you turned them out again, whether they would stay, because I don't think they really enjoyed that part very much. Versus, like, remember when we had Jake and Jack, the two of them? So we had these two horses, you guys, Lil's two oldest sons, and oh, they were just terrible together. They were terrible because they would just leave whenever they felt like it. And they were terrible on fences. They were just because they'd just go through the hot wire. And oh, Lisa knows. So anyway, we ended up giving, yeah, Jake and Jack. Oh my God. And so you'd wake up in the middle of the night, and they'd be at the neighbors. They didn't care. They would be eating people's lawns. They weren't stressed out. It's like, what's the problem? And then when we separated them, gave Jakey to Lisa, they were way better. They were way better, but the two of them together was just awful. Yeah, Jakey is way better. Jack was totally different when they were separated. So, anyway, there's that. Some, the book Jeannie. Are you here this morning? She gave punk ass thugs. They really were. They were kind of nice about it, but they were just doesn't did not mean to, we're not meant to be grown ups together. So Jeannie lent me a book when I was at your house, Michael, called Positive Tension. Who's read that book? Who's read Positive from Hi from Miriam? Hi. Remind me what Miriam's dog's name is. I was thinking about her the other day because when I drove out that day, she was in the car, and it's been driving me nuts what her name is. Um, so the oh, it's Gianna's dog. It's not Miriam's dog. It's Gianna's dog.
It's all of them.
Oh, their dog. Okay.
Gianna, yeah, Gianna and the dog are close.
Willa. Ah, Willa. Yeah, they're bonded, the two of them. So, um, anyway, this book. Who's read the book? Because it, I'm only like 35 or 40% through. So I hate to recommend a book. You know how that is, Michael? When you're like, okay, I've liked it so far. And then sometimes if you say anything about it, then you get a little farther in, you're like, oh, this is never mind, never mind. Because you don't, here's the other thing, Michael. And Wendy and I got to talk a lot about this because jumping ahead or jumping back to the last weekend, I stayed with my friends Mark and Wendy. And Wendy is the one I got Zorro from, Zorro and Novella. Really, she facilitated the Novella thing kind of at the same time. And she is super freaking educated, not only in practice but also in study. Like probably the most educated person I know in real life. Um, Again, she's super into the classical dressage and has gorgeous Iberians. She has a magic horse named Nativo, who I got to see again. He is truly, whoa. I mean, he is a unicorn, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. It's just the way he is. He's like an angel. I'm serious. It's really quite strange. You think if there was an archangel, not even an archangel, because those guys are fierce, but um Nativo is very, I don't know. Anyway, whatever. So I got to stay at their house, which is awesome because I haven't been hanging out with Mark and Wendy, for a while since they moved all the way down to southern Texas, but then they're back in Arizona now. So talking to Wendy in the evenings about all the things that I would see during the day was perfect. So the idea that so I guess all I'm saying is studying sometimes it's cool to be at the place where I can read somebody else's thoughts and ideas and start even or listen to a teacher and kind of think, okay, I'm measuring all of this with what I am experiencing. You kind of need to stay open-minded, not like, oh, I know everything, but also there are times when a person or you're either reading or watching something and you're like, that doesn't jive with what I have been experiencing or have experienced.
Yeah.
So, anyway, it's kind of been interesting to read that book. And Gianna's the dog person. Yeah. And also to be really, I'm kind of obsessed with the flying change right now. Not because I'm trying to make one happen on any of my horses really, although probably the end of the year we'll kind of I'm preparing this new way, kind of just a gentle new way though. And so there's that. Also, I what do you think about what I sent you that Kip and I had talked about and that Terry and I had talked about? Did you get a chance to read through that? You guys, so the other day I'm coming home from the clinic and Kip sends me these two lines because Kip and I are both really into these like 1960s physics lectures. And I don't know who said it, but he goes, this is what the text message said. Matter tells space how to curve, and space tells matter where to move.
It's the
And
first the the second part makes more easy sense to me than the first.
yeah, the first thing that occurs to me though is how for the first principles, this is the thing, threading through going to the buck clinic, watching all those horses, having watched all my horses, reading this book, talking to Wendy, who because Wendy and I come from Pirelli together, that's how we met. And then she's ridden with Buck, and Paul started one of her horses, and like she's been with me all along, but she kind of really zoomed in on the classical high school. Um, and I've kind of stuck with the Buck Brannaman bridle horse thing with my personal dressage study alongside it. So the thread that I keep coming back to, you guys, is that the first principles, and what I mean by that is like the reality of physics, the reality of riding a quadruped, the reality of um, how the bodies move and the dimensions exist. That's just all there is to it. And then meaning those don't change. Right? So our understanding maybe of how those things work and how to use them evolves and changes, but the thing doesn't change.
Mhm.
So, Michael,
The horse
matter.
is still a horse.
Yeah.
We're still a human. Two different species that take up certain volume of space, move in a limited range of motion, given the way the body is structured, operate under the forces of gravity with limited physical ability as far as your ability to define or to defy that gravity for however long. She's gonna let me keep talking and explain what she means by first principles here, because
Well,
I because I read the thing she said. um, yeah, and having a certain, just thinking of different horses and personalities, a certain energy that and people that comes into that experience that I feel can change a little bit more, but the fact that there is interplay on more than just a physical spatial element is a, you could call it a first principle, like it's unrefutable. And whether you acknowledge it or not, it's there, right? I guess that's probably the biggest thing, like the things that, whether you want to get in the weeds and talk about it or not, the reality is you can say there are some of these things. um, so you can brush off the, um, I guess you could brush off the emotional component. It is still there. It is still influencing the totality of the physical component and the limits and possibilities there. So,
yeah. So the good, yes, Michael. Do you have any other thoughts regarding that for right now? I looked up. I just asked Terry what the definition of a first principle was, and it's very interesting. But so I guess before I jump into that, it's like, well, why does that matter?
well, because it is, I guess it can kind of, Sadie, quit the, shh. Oh. Lydia just woke up, so Sadie's all whiny and excited that she's
I
part of
can't.
the world right now. Um, I guess it because it's, what was the question? Why does it matter?
Yeah. In other words, the
I guess it because it defines what you're operating with and within.
yes, yes, yes.
You're the things that you are working with. Um, you know, you're out in Mother Nature in extreme temperatures. Like there's certain things you can control and certain things you can't, and you have to operate within the tools you have on your person and what Mother Nature throws at you. You can't deny that they exist and pretend that, like, you have to survive within that, or you're in a shop and you're trying to build something and like you have what you have. If you can't go get additional materials, whatever you're trying to create is either possible to create given what you have, or you're going to have to get creative and use the tools you have or the raw materials you have to try to create some version of what you have in your mind, but you're limited by what is physically there.
That's too well, but not just that, right? This is, I guess, the thing. No matter how much you search, and this is kind of important, you guys, no matter how much you search around and around and around for more information, there are going to be certain fundamental principles that cannot be changed. Or at least, we get to the bases of what we understand. I mean, I guess we could always say, okay, who knows? We could say, even if you were out in the wilderness and you had limited tools, da, 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 well, one of the things you're still going to be limited by is that, or a first principle concept would be there. is gravity. It is the sun will rise and set. Your heart has to beat in order for you to stay alive. Like you have to consume a certain amount of oxygen. Those types of things to me. So you want me to read what,
Sure.
just for fun. So at its core, a first principle is a foundational proposition or assumption that cannot be deduced from any other proposition or assumption, which is so important. It's so important because then it's like, well, whoever you're riding with, whatever you're studying is not the first principle is not dependent on a bunch of other assumptions or opinions or ways of
No,
just.
but it is. I mean, in terms of um, like in the context of a debate and trying to arrive at first principles within which the debate can operate.
Yeah,
First principle in that context is, are your assumptions. We are assuming these things together, which is a little different, or disagreeing on these things. And so we're arguing on what our
yeah,
first principles ought to be. That's a little different than the way you're using the phrase, or um, the way you just described it, as like these just don't change no matter who you're riding with or what they think about them.
yeah.
Like they just exist, right? Just a little bit of a different.
How is it different?
Was a little bit of a different definition of first principles. It's like what one is an assumption. I mean, that's the first words of that definition is an assumption.
Hmm.
So is it an assumption or is it just a given? Matter exists. Right? I mean, unless we get into,
But
is
then,
this all an illusion and whatever, and then you could say, well, it's an assumption that matter exists and
well,
that
there.
this is all reality, and you know,
So,
depends on how far back you want to get into philosophy and you know whatnot.
well, right. And so, one thing I would say, like, what's the difference? And I don't know the answer to this. What's the difference between a fact and a first principle? And those are very important because it's like the horse has four legs. That's
Mhm.
it. The horse is anatomically like this, you know? And so,
So
this
to
is,
me, that would be a fact over against a first principle, unless there is a definition one could argue of a first principle that you know that might be an additional way of using the term first principle if we're wanting to um, utilize first principle within the confines of history and the use of the English language and how first principle has been used. Or are we going to use it in some new and innovative way with our own definition that may someday catch on and be added to the dictionary? And I mean, that's the crazy thing about language, which I love. Don't spend a lot of time thinking about, but the way language changes and forms, and just the way things are used, and doesn't fascinate me as much in the moving forward of you know this slang has now become part of the parlance. I mean, that's interesting, but the way language has developed and meaning is created and meaning changes, um, just through sheer usage of sounds and syllables. um, we're able to communicate, and that's kind of what we do every week, is like dance around with what do we mean by these words. And
well,
uh,
let me finish
yeah,
reading this.
but go back to your
Well, because
definition there.
it might help a little bit. Okay, so let me just read the whole thing one more time. At its core, a first principle is a foundational proposition or assumption that cannot be deduced from any other
Yeah.
proposition or assumption. In simpler terms, this is a basic building block of knowledge that is known to be true, that doesn't require further proof. The concept is most famously associated with Aristotle, who described it as the first basis from which a thing is known. Very important, of course. And then Elon is has popularized the first principle thinking as a tool of innovation. So, to find a first principle, again, let's think in terms of horsemanship, you guys. To find a first principle, you must strip a complex problem down to its fundamental truth. This is the opposite of reasoning by analogy, which we do a lot here. Where we do things like, this is how they've always done it, or because X is like Y.
Mm-hmm.
We have to, so instead of looking at a car and seeing a vehicle, a first principle thinker sees aluminum, steel, fiber, the combustion of fuel, discharge of a battery, the physics of friction and energy transfer. That's really important. We could just substitute, like, instead of looking at a dressage horse and seeing a dressage horse, it's like, well, what is this? This is locomotion. This is a level of engagement and collection. This is mental, emotional, physical turned loose. This is a spiritual connect, right? Like, we strip back. So, reasoning by analogy,
So wait, are you saying all those are first principles?
no, what I'm saying is you
Those are
could,
component
oh,
pieces.
those are first principles. Like the horse has to locomote himself across the ground. A first principle to me is what? It's in the five principles, you guys.
A horse has to move their own body. Uh, is that the one you're referring
Yep.
to? Yeah. So
To me, that's irrefutable.
yeah.
Period. Like, that is an irrefutable principle. No, to whatever degree you will not accept that, do not accept that, have not thought about that, do not operate that way, your results will be dictated by how much you are trying to move the horse's body for them. That's it. So it's a great example, you guys, as of how I think about a first principle in regards to horsemanship. So I have a few more things to read, but tell me what you're thinking right now, Michael.
Well, I mean, if we're back to what I said earlier of like the reality that there are two beings there with emotions and ideas that you're trying to get together is also a part of the first principle, but you know,
And then how that comes along is not a first principle. For instance, you could have one rider or trainer, however you want to say it, be like, well, this is how I achieve X.
mhm.
That's not a first principle, though, because there's so many variables that may or may not translate to the next pair, horse human. Some of those things are going to work very well, depending on how well they work with the first principles. But you could have a person who says they do something by doing X, and it's like, well, that's not what they're doing at all. That's just what they think they're doing.
I yeah, I guess the emotional component coming in there, eh, like to what degree is there interplay? Like, if you say it's there and like, you don't need anything else to arrive at that, to what degree is there an emotional component we can say is stands on its own and needs nothing else to for us to arrive at it?
The horse has emotions. That would be one thing.
Well, yes, but so that is irrefutable given the information we have. But is we're arriving in that based on a feeling that we have, perceptions that we have of, and interpretations of body language and reactions and interactions that we have. So I guess that's where you get back to how much of this is an illusion and an imagination, and like going back into, I wish I knew what philosopher we were, or scientific theory you're operating under. Um,
This was Aristotle who.
yeah, but the whole, does it exist? Does, or is it all an illusion where you just go, well, I don't know. I'm not astute enough to play in that realm, or to talk in that, um, to theorize on that level. But to what degree can we? I mean, it's all going to depend on your defining first principles in your own, what you're including and what you're not. Because to me, it's, if you're saying it is there and depends on nothing else to, for its existence, you don't need to rely on something else to define its, or to prove it. To what degree is that emotional component, at least in the horse, irrefutable by that definition?
We talk about the difference between a fact and a first principle. That could help.
Yeah, fact and a first principle, or probably what's tangible over against, yeah, I don't know, but locomotion isn't tangible. It is, if we're talking about matter versus space, but even then, like, do you get emotions out of matter in space? You get movement from point A to point B. It's operating largely in the, um, existence or non-existence of matter and how it moves. That's different than adding in the emotional component, because the movement of matter from point A to point B, given the forces of nature in terms of gravity, and gravity being the biggest one, um, all of that is devoid of anything emotion. Like, the ball goes, but the ball has no emotions. Gravity has no play on what anything feels, or how it thinks about gravity acting upon it.
Hmm.
I don't know. So I'm going fact versus first principle,
Important. Uh-huh.
tangibility versus not, intangible, depending on the existence of matter. The existence of matter is one of the things, or the existence of the ability to perceive. I mean, to read a horse's mind. I mean, how many times do I say it sounds ridiculous, but read the horse's mind? Like, you got to go on what you have here and try to imagine what they're thinking in order to operate within that. Well, then how can that be the fact that a horse has? I mean, again, if you're saying it's an assumption, to me, the definition, it's an assumption, and yet it requires nothing for it to be
No other.
proven. No other information to, you know, support its existence, right? It's a little bit of a dodging around between those two that are, I won't say mutually exclusive within a definition, but it's an odd combination of characterizing a first principle with both of those words, assumption, and I think it's not a word but a phrase, relying on nothing else to
No other assumptions. Yeah.
No other assumptions too. So is it an assumption or is it self-standing? And then yeah, we're into what's the difference between a first principle and a fact?
So shall I read that?
Sure.
So a fact at a glance, a fact is a discrete data point, while a first principle is an irreducible building block used for consideration. Again, think about it just in terms of horsemanship, very valuable. So, the nature of a fact is a specific piece of information that has been proven true or is universally accepted based on evidence. For instance, the horse has four legs. It's a terminal point of data. So facts are descriptive, historical, or observational. That to me would be horse has emotions, like that's observational, right? They tell you the current state of a system. The limitation is, this is interesting, the limitation is that facts are often context dependent. If the environment changes, a fact may no longer apply or become irrelevant. I'm not for sure how to. I'd have to think about that a little bit more, you guys, in terms of like coming up with an example that the horse. I mean, I suppose you could say, oh, well, the horse is reactive. In that moment, that could be true, but in a different environment, maybe that's not a fact. Like the horse could be being reactive at that time. The horse is being reactive. Okay, yes, that's true in the moment. Is that going to be true in 5 minutes? Maybe not, or the horse is afraid of the saddle. Well, that absolutely could be true in that moment, but it's not going to remain true. For instance, so Terry knows I'm into Bitcoin. So he says the principle of Bitcoin, excuse me, an example is the price of Bitcoin is 90,000, which by the way, this morning it was 69,000. This is a fact at a specific moment in time. So it's a what? Let's compare this to a first principle, which is a foundational proposition or assumption that cannot be deduced from any other proposition or assumption. It's the source code of a concept. And this is important because when we talk about horsemanship, sometimes an entire house of cards can be built one assumption on top of the other. And maybe that gets you to a true point or a point that you like or can believe in or serves you, the horse, whatever. But when we talk about going back to a first principle, it's not reliant on anything, any of the cards above it, right? So a characteristic is a first principle. First principles are the granular truths left over when you strip away all assumptions, analogies, and conventions. They are tools used for synthesis, building new ideas from the ground up rather than by following a manual. And this, as in this period of study, as I'm rotating back towards this, considering we're trying to let whatever assumptions I've built on the first principles not to disappear. A lot of times they're right. you know but like just to lay back and be lit, and it was really helpful to watch Buck ride and watch the clinic. I mean, I've been going to the first clinic of the year for, I don't know, 14 years or something. um and to just sort of float with the idea of like, okay, what is the core of this? What is a first principle that no matter what, you can say, yep, this is what we would hold to be true. While facts tell you what's happening, this is the other important thing. While facts tell you what's happening, first principles allow you to predict what could happen. You guys, in horsemanship, come on. So they provide clarity, you know? And so, for an example, mathematical scarcity creates value in a digital network. So this is a first principle. So again, we're talking about Bitcoin. There's only 21 million Bitcoin. That's it. There are never going to be any more. So total scarcity, a finite amount, provides value. That's the first principle. So regardless of the current price, the underlying principle of supply and demand remains constant. So a fact describes a result. Again, what like a flying chain, or let's just say a canter is a 3-beat gate,
Mm-hmm.
right? A first principle explains the underlying cause of that. Like, well, okay, so why is it a 3-beat gate? What is happening there? Stability, the fact can change. A first principle is a highly stable variant. I love that. That is so true. And I'm just feeling that more and more and more in myself, which is awesome because if we figure out the first principles in the horsemanship, we can build anything we want so long as we figure out what those are and work within it. So, um, what would how would we characterize field timing and balance? Not in terms of skills, you guys. I was talking about that when I made my note at base camp the other day. Um, but are are those first principles or are those facts? Or are those facts and then how we apply them to horsemanship are first principles, which is what I would say off the top. So
So do first
this
principles help you arrive at facts, and facts help you arrive at first principles? And if something, yeah.
Mm. So this is okay, let me just keep going for another couple seconds here. So the relationship between a fact and a first principle, according to Terry here, which I do think is right, a collection of facts form a map. A first principle is the physics that created the territory. Oh my god. So you could be like, okay, well, this horse is lame. Well, how did this horse get lame? Something specific must have happened in order for this to be the case, right? Okay, so why the distinction matters. Relying solely on facts leads to reasoning by analogy, copying what others are doing because it worked in the past. This often results in static thinking. Michael, this is what I have not done. You've been around, we've been together a long time on this horsemanship road. That is what I have not done. When someone else states a fact and I just float around with it. I'm not going to do what they do just because that's what they said. Period. I'm not right? Okay.
Mhm.
So, reasoning from first principles requires more cognitive effort, but leads to true innovation. You guys, this is what I'm trying to do at Horsemanship Insider. And what I keep like I want some companionship in this pursuit this way, which is why when someone's like, just tell me what to do, it's like, oh my God, we are not, you're not in alignment right now. you know, so because I'm excited about innovation. I'm excited about the cognitive effort of it. And so of course Buck to some degree would be like, why are you trying to reinvent the wheel? That's not at all what it is. But he would be like, for instance, we were talking about this last weekend. He's like, why do you like it's working for you? Why do you care? And this is a valid question and I have an answer. My answer is because just because it's working does not mean I understand the first principles. And if I do not understand the first principles, as soon as the variables change, different horse, different situation, different gymnastic development, like all sort, as soon as the variables change, if I don't understand the first principles, I'm sunk.
Mhm.
This is why you've seen training
Well,
systems.
carry on.
So one more thing. So, last sentence. In essence, facts are the bricks. The first principles are the laws of physics that determine how these bricks must be laid to prevent the building from falling down. The laws of physics.
So going back on you're sunk if you don't know the first principles. Pushing back on that a little bit, it knowing them or not, you're operating within them.
Mhm.
And
Maybe.
if you're operating with a feel, a lot can be happening without you having defined it or noted it consciously. And you can have that experience and feel that has given you such and such a result in this case with these variables carry you through operating in a second situation with different variables under those same principles without having to find those principles.
And Corey, we're going to get to you in just a second. Michael, can you summarize that one more time or go through it one more time?
So pushing back on, I need to know the principles, otherwise I'm sunk, is I think you can step into a new situation with new variables, different horse, different situation, you know, all of one or both of those things, and not be sunk unless you know what the first principles are, because you've been operating within those first principles, acknowledged and defined or not,
Sure. Or to what
and
degree you are.
and you can, based on feel and experience, operate within this new scenario, new variables with those first principles, again, acknowledged, defined or not, and arrive at a certain result. So, that's where Buck would, it makes sense to say, what what's the point of defining them? It's you've got them somewhere inside of you. They're working for you. You're working within them. Why do we have to name them, label them, point
Yeah.
them out?
Yep. And if a person, let me say this, and perhaps Buck's a great example of this, is if a person figures out how to use the first principles, which to whatever degree a person is having success, they absolutely are working within those, obviously, right?
Mm.
But I don't feel like, or let me say this. Also, we can rely on the horse to fill in so much. That's another thing I'm thinking about. Like, and I want to mention something about the flying change. Corey and I were just talking about this the other day. That makes it more relevant, right? But for me, understanding the first principle allows me to build and more accurately without as much luck, and to systematically solve challenges without flailing around. And that becomes more and more important, Michael. If I'm thinking, well, I want my horse to do the most, I don't want my horse to fit into my system. I want to fit into the horse's system. That doesn't mean I want the horse to decide all the things to do. That's not what I'm talking about. People think about like, oh, you're going to be the person who just waits for the. No, that's not what I'm talking about. But a horse will do so many things for us in spite of us. I am
Mhm.
not the. And so I guess the more skilled a person is, and like Buck would say, well, I've done 40,000 colts, and it's like, okay, well, that's a lot of unconscious data that you have gathered and adjusted. Well, so do you want, for those of us who cannot accumulate that much experience, a way to fill that in is to dial in and observe A, the facts, and B, the
But
first principles.
but does that get in the way? Can that get in the way of operating within that unconscious, I mean, connections that our brain just like the horse filling in, our brain fills in all kinds of details, drawing those connections without us consciously going, oh, this horse is like that horse is like this, and that expression. And, our brains are doing something of what
Yeah, for sure.
what
It's
a robot would do based on, you know, very clear data calculations. This angle of the body does this, and like our brains, with enough experience, with enough data points, is putting that together subconsciously, right?
and
So
but
if
perfectly put.
trying to define that
Yeah.
and get it back to first principles, like, I don't know, I can see it getting back to first principles, but trying to describe everything or act upon things because of your conscious understanding of them in having brought something back to first principles, does that not just fly in the face of this subconscious feeling, and not feeling in the sense of oh, this is how I feel about it, but like your definition of feel is different depending on how you say the word feel or feeling. It's a feeling, right? Is how you've been getting about it. But how much does that fly in the face of the real openness to letting the horse fill in? Is this kind of loose, um
It
loose hold on
That's a great way to say it.
understanding
Yep.
it all, or quantifying or describing it all, and just seeing what shows up based on the way you're presenting yourself, which is based on your brain having made, given your experience, all of these connections. I mean, yesterday I was helping Kim dial in on things that, given my experience, are, I'm trying to put words on it for Kim so she can, like you say, like it's a shortcut, arrive at it so I can help her see it without the benefit of, you know, so many horses, so many years of experience. I might have picked up on a lot of those things with, well, I not might have, I have picked up a lot of those things without them ever having been described to me. But that doesn't make describing them to her less valuable.
Mhm. Agree.
And in a way, I mean, if you don't have the limits of time and lack of experience, you might arrive at those things in a more organic way, that, who knows, maybe it's faster, maybe it's not, maybe it's deeper in you, maybe it's not, maybe it's subconscious, maybe it's as opposed to not. And that's better, or it just flows out more.
I have a
one
feeling.
not one not right, the other wrong, but can being too thinky or evaluative, I mean, Ray would say, do your feeling during the day and your thinking at night. Being too trying to arrive at the measures of what is irrefutable, what are our first principles, and stack it together consciously in a bit. uh, I'm not going to like this, where this is going to take us, but flies in the face of feel. And I say that because I'm not sure I can defend that entirely, that it flies in the face of it, but it's at least a there is a contrast I think we can't argue between the two. So there's where flies in the face of it comes in. Um,
But okay, but that's assuming that we can't have both happening, or that one is detrimental to the other. And I think that our
well, I
relationship.
think that's what I'm saying is the one can be detrimental to the other
Mhm.
if you're because I think it all comes back to feel, which I think has a subconscious emotive component that probably defies calculation, conscious description, right? And it
Maybe.
relies on that. So,
I don't
to
know if I agree with that. I don't know
okay,
if I agree with that, because I think that a first principle and an emotional spiritual experience, whether or not we can concentrate on one to the detriment of the other, the first principle is what it is. The fact is what it is in that moment, however we want to say it. And then our interaction with those first principles is the part that I think you're exactly right. That looseness, that, and in fact, as soon as you can get to that room that we were talking about with the horse and the person, like that's the most important thing. But you're still not flying in the face of a first principle.
yes,
And the value to me, it's not about overthinking it, which is the accusation always. You're overthinking it.
yeah,
I mean, Ray's most famous quote is think. So I don't even mention that because a lot of times, because it's like, I
just gonna
mean,
piss them off.
yeah, it's like I don't know what to say, but
Hmm.
it's not to overthink and fly in the face of feel. That's not what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
I'm talking about, I'll give you a couple examples of like an Eva. You remember like when you're riding Pepita around, and I'm like, well, I mean, do this next, you know? And if you had known, I'm not being critical, of course, you're learning just like me. But if you had a little bit of more of a grasp, which I suspect you do now, of like what the first principles are as we're guiding our horse along, as we're teaching the horse, it's like the feel is the way that you communicate it, the way that you let the horse get to the answer. You set it up and let them find it. You deal with all the intangible things like the emotion and the spirit and all of that. But instead of thinking of like, oh, I do X to get Y, and you guys have heard me say this, why are we doing it? Why though? And that's really important, because as we're choosing what selecting movements, selecting the process to which we ride our horses and develop our horses, those selections are based on first principles. And if you want to just follow a system, marry up to a system and just be like, this is what I'm doing, that's it. And what I think what you're saying, Michael, maybe is if you get enough of a feel for the horse, then you don't need to consciously have any clue about the first principles, because if you just flow along with what the horse is telling you, mentally, emotionally, physically, then it doesn't matter, which I would agree, because then you're interacting with the first principles unconsciously to such an accurate degree that who it doesn't make any difference whether you know what you're doing or not.
Yeah,
It makes a difference to me at this point. Like Buck's like, why do you care? You can do all this. Well, I do care because I think sometimes I'm stepping on the first principles by accident. Additionally, I think that, yeah, so I mean, that's partially well, I would say that's a big part of the answer. Is it's like I think these things can be done better. So let's come to the flying change. Here's a question in my mind. I have a few questions. But I've heard of 14 horses, right? And well, minus one because one of them is a mule. And the way they get turned out at my house, they make a flying change or two every single day as they go out. And I watch them do it. So here I am observing the natural reality of the thing. So when we think about training, we need to develop more of a moment of suspension. We have to ask when the inside front foot is on the ground, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, maybe those are true. However, when I watch my horses do the flying change, they are not making a huge deal of a moment of suspension. They are not jumping over something. They are not galloping. They make a very easy flying change. It's not a big deal. So it's neither mentally, emotionally, or physically a big deal. Whether it's Davino with lots of airtime or Bonnie with no airtime, it's like it doesn't make any difference. Then we come to the first principle in physics, where we say that matter, let's just say the Earth, matter dictates how space moves, how space curves. Sorry, it doesn't move, but space is curving around some matter, right? And then the space in space is what sucks the matter along. Okay, so as we're riding, I was just thinking about this in regards to the flying change specifically, because the bigger issue is not how much you manufacture this. Like, we can do that to set it up so that there's more of a draw to where we want it to go. But if, once again, a principle that we have decided is true based on no other assumptions is that horses are like water. They will just go to the path of least resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be the second part of the that statement, that physics statement, where space tells matter how to move. So, like we were talking about before, and you were like, if you just open that little section, the horse is just going to flow into it. So, to me, gathering all this information about the flying change, now we could say, okay, Emma, but if you had a bazillion more hours, especially on horses that were awesome at flying changes, you could ride more wide open spaces. That's how Gary learned them, riding a million gajillion miles, you know, on horses he knew very well. Well, yeah, maybe none of those things would be interesting or important. But understanding how and why these things start to shape up is really important because then I get to think for myself when I'm building stuff and teaching my horses. And I didn't ask this to Buck, but maybe he would just, I would, it's like, well, that's not valuable to you because you get more lost in the weeds. I don't know if I would agree with that.
Well, I guess it depends on whether it is taking you toward the result you're looking for or inhibiting your progress toward that result. And the result not necessarily being anything straight or strictly physical.
And the more you clear the static out of what you're asking your horse to do, by accidentally violating a first principle or accidentally not working within the facts, the draggier the whole process is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unless we were saying, like, if the horse never got tight, or the horse never switched his tail, or the horse was never frustrated, or the horse was never, set up to physically be hurting because we were doing things wrong, or I don't know. I think it's valuable to just not be bumping around on those edges if possible. Now, does it replace the feeling of the horse doing it for themselves? The listening to the horse, I was thinking about that because, funnily enough, as I'm thinking about drawing my horse,
Funnily.
funnily enough, as I'm thinking of drawing my horse into the flying change versus sending them into the change, I'm like, aha, okay, I'm gonna really just be disciplined about seeing if my horse's canter departs can be a draw into the lead versus any kind of sending into the lead, right? Subtle, but
Which, which I think you've done for a while, and it was sort of discouraged that it being just that, or at least the cue being akin to that. No.
discouraged from outside, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and then when you think, especially, like, if you're someone who wants to get to the flying changes, and especially if you're someone that's riding horses that are not naturally going to, easily do that under saddle, because here's the lore around the flying change. It's like, oh, every horse can do it, the babies can do it, but when you start to ride a horse, then it's very difficult and you have to totally retrain them. And I'm just like, I don't know. Those are a lot of assumptions based on other assumptions, is all I'm saying. And then once you start scaling back to, like, questioning this, questioning this, questioning this, because it's like, well, is it difficult for a horse to do a flying change because, when we're riding them, because they haven't turned loose to the tack, to the rider, to the situation, to a training environment, and that's why they can't do it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you're someone like me who is curious, the biggest thing, I'm not competing, who cares? I'm First of all, it's easier to pilot your horse around if you can ride in a canter and change leads whenever you is suitable. That's super handy. Um, but also it's just interesting to be able to ride the horse doing all the things that maybe it could do when it was a baby. Okay, that's very interesting. So when you think about how do you ask for canter in the first place, now you have to have a premise for the flying change way before you're even doing the flying changes, right? Because if you, for instance, if you're going to cue the flying change from your outside leg, well, then that should be your canter depart.
Mm-hmm. For congruency's sake.
Well, yeah. Versus my theory, and this is where I need the study time. And at a certain point, I need to stop making Buck or anybody else crazy by asking. Because it's like, look, I have these theories that I need to talk to my horses about, and play around with. I
You
want,
you need to test the theories rather than ask someone else what they think about the theories.
especially when they have a whole scaffolding of principles based on other principles that are theories based on theories, or assumptions based on assumptions, and I'm questioning all of them, and then the person is like, I don't know what your problem is,
Yeah.
because the way they've built the assumptions works,
Mm-hmm.
right? But that's like saying a car. This is the whole point of Elon. Like a car, a gasoline car has a certain result. You can drive the car around. That's it. Well, If you wanted to design a car that is powered by something else, it's still going to be a car. You still have to operate from some first principles and then redesign as you go along. Okay. So, my theory of drawing the horse into the change, which is very different in terms of my understanding of what I'm doing than even,
Then yeah, then just cueing. I mean, that's what it came to mind thinking back to the discussion years ago, or not discussion, but and suggestion that you know you need more than just that cue of sliding the front your inside foot forward, which you could say to be congruent in all of the cues or the aids or the communication. That might be true, but you were still thinking in terms of cues rather than space and opening into space as opposed to.
and I was thinking about lining a horse out because I've been thinking about that so much more over the last 3 months, maybe 2 months, 3 months. Um, how you're lining the horse out all the time, all the time, all the time, all the time, no matter what you're doing. Curves, straight lines, changes of direction, lining the horse out. What's another word for lining the horse out? Or another way to say it? What's the principle?
I don't know, turning loose.
Space tells matter how to move. Okay, so you can either be lifting the foot and moving it, or you can just be opening that space and the horse is flowing into it. Okay, so funny story about novella, because as I was thinking about
So,
this on
so
airplane.
space telling matter how to move by virtue of opening up space, like something has to define, let's say, the outside of the rectangle,
Mhm.
even if the outside of the rectangle is not actively saying go into that space, matter coming up against the shape of that space is
That's right.
more than just moving into the void that space has offered.
Well, the void is defined by the curves. I think that's the idea, you know.
So
And
that part my brain's not wrapping around yet. We'll have to work on that.
anyway, my point to you is
Yeah.
yes, the
Okay.
definition.
Novella.
Well, the definition of the outside of the rectangle, absolutely. So if you're going to make a flying change right to left, the hindquarters can't keep flying out of the rectangle to the right. Of course not. You have to have some definition of the rectangle. This way, you shouldn't randomly be doing flying changes unless the horse is lining out. Thusly, my horses drawing out to the hay piles in the morning, like they're going to the hay piles. Whether or not they need to change the footfalls, that doesn't make any difference to them. They just do it.
Hmm.
They're drawing somewhere. They're not being driven somewhere.
Hmm.
This is very subtle, but I think it's very important. So, just the funny part of the rest of the story for Vivian is just because I was flying home, on Monday, and I was like, I mean, not Vivian. Uh, and though we could talk about Vivian and her flying changes, because remember how she hated the teardrop exercise? Oh God, she hated it. She was like, "Well, I don't like it. Let's do it this way." So I never harped on it. She could do the teardrop, but she wasn't interesting to her in terms of the flying change. But
Hmm.
Novella has always wanted me to do our canard parts by opening space on the inside. Yeah, that's just her preference. Now, it doesn't mean if I put my outside leg on, she shouldn't yield, whether that be haunches in or half pass or whatever. Like, don't just swing your hindquarters into them. That does not, of
Hmm.
course. But I was doing our or just canters yesterday, and it was just hilarious because she's like, "Oh, good job, mom." She's like, "What happened to you?" "Pretty good." And I'm like, "I know, sorry." Because she was trying to tell me all along that that was her preference. You know, and thinking of the Willow video, you guys at Horsemanship Insiders watched the Willow video from the other day. If you watch those, like, I'm just saying, watch your horses, Michael. I'm just saying, watch your horses, ride your horses, go frame by frame. And the reality is that they are being drawn forward into the canter depart or forward into the flying change. And whether or not we're shooshing them from one side to the other or manipulating them from one side to the other, or more commonly, binding them up so that they have to leap somewhere and then you kind of throw them off balance to whatever degree they're just going to be like, well, okay, we're going to do
Mhm.
the change. I've done it. It's like, well, okay, so yes, I can do it that way. And this is the premise. Like, well, why do you care? You're doing your flying change. It's like, I do care. I do care. I'm very interested for to be able to do a flying change on a green horse that hasn't been collected. I'm very interested in that. Yes. Is that possible? Like, how much can I get with the horse and be in time and flowing along? And why not?
Yeah.
I'm very interested in this.
Back to this, the moving into the space and space defining or space moving the matter and the curve piece that I'm thinking about how to
Michael, think about this.
yes.
If space
Yes.
is fixed, excuse me, sorry. If matter is a fixed, then space has to curve. If matter is going to move, it has to move into whatever space is available.
And so it kind of it needs both. Space provides both the space to move into and the friction of space being unavailable. And
Yes.
that's
Yes.
what
Oh, Michael, I have another thing. And since you're busy, I want we're going to talk about this on the show, even though this is something I would talk about more privately. Finish your thought, but let's not. I want to get to this before then.
that was my thought. Go ahead.
Well, so say it again because I probably interrupted. The point about the matter in the way creating friction.
Space in the way creating friction to move the matter. In order for the matter to move into the open space, like there's only I guess you could say there's only so much, like if the matter's holding together for it to move into that space, whether it's holding together or not, regardless of that, for it to move into that space, there has to be other space that causes some friction, not in the sense of slowing it down, but friction in the sense of redirecting into the opening.
Well, well, if there's an opening, there should be. That is the absence of friction.
I know, but if there is no friction on the other side, then there are openings
Then
other
we would be nothing.
elsewhere.
Then we would have nothing. There would be nothingness.
Yeah.
There would be no definition, no shape. This is the thing. There would be no curve. There would be no shape if we didn't have guides.
Hmm. So I guess what I'm saying is, someone was telling me the other day about a horrific accident of a car going off the road and into a tree and not following the curve of the road. So if there is not some definition, the turning of the wheel, the grip of the road, the something that guides the car around the curve, into the open space of the road ahead of you on the right, um, then what's to keep the car from heading off straight off the road on this curve and into the tree?
You
So
don't
the space being
for
open is one thing,
Yep. The forces on either side.
but there, I mean, what is inertia? A object is the word there, but a matter moving in one direction will continue in that direction until something acts upon it, until it is acted upon, whether that be gravity or coming up against the pinball machine and the
See?
the guide directing the ball around into this open space. Because so having an open space is one side of it, and I guess that's always there is room to go forward, even though we are defining the sides of the rectangle or the space within which that matter can operate. There still has to be somewhere for that matter to go. Maybe it's up in terms of reshaping the matter, but it's also forward in terms of there's somewhere for the matter to travel. Um,
100%. Exactly what I'm saying. Yes.
so
And
there is I guess I'm having a harder time picturing, what is it, matter bends space, or space has to bend to direct the matter. Read the thing from Kip again.
well, I don't have it. It's on my phone. But I
No,
would
but you've repeated it a couple times, so it's in your mind. Say it again.
yes. Matter tells space how to curve.
See, that's the part that I'm.
No, you're not. You're saying exactly that. Is that if there is something that is more firm than the inertia,
Hmm.
a matter object, like you said, if there's an like a guardrail or the force of the tree is going to eventually stop the car,
Hmm.
then that is going to tell space how to curve. So, for instance, a tree grows up, and then there's space around the tree. I'm sure that goes all the way down to the atom and the space around the atom or the space within a cell, etc. But let's just imagine a
Well,
tree.
I guess what's hard is it feels like matter consumes or
Is it
occupies space that then directs other matter, but I don't see how matter
if space
tells
here?
space how to curve.
Well, otherwise space wouldn't curve; it would just be,
Hmm.
unless there's a
But
tree to.
it's the matter that's taking up that space. Otherwise,
I
you
think
know.
you're making a hierarchy where there's no hierarchy. Maybe.
Oh, anyway, what were you gonna say?
Oh, do you want to hear my flying changes thing?
Well, I don't know. Is that what you were gonna say? I want to hear what you were gonna say.
Yeah,
Okay,
this is
go ahead.
before. Okay, so you know how everybody talks about the how horses like kind of kick up in the back sometimes when they're learning their change,
Mm-hmm.
and like I mean, you could hear it from everybody. Oh, the horse is just learning how to get over onto the new lead. Oh, they're just trying to figure their feet out, right? Okay, what if it's just that the person is sitting on the new inside hind leg too long, fractionally too long, and so they're blocking the space into which the new inside hind leg has to go. So the horse is like, "Oh, let me help you get the fuck off my inside hind leg so
Bop.
that I can swing my inside hind leg forward." And it's like,
Um,
so actually, the problem is the person is sitting on the inside hind leg too long, and the horse is like, get up and over to the outside hind leg.
mm.
Okay, so maybe I'm not right about that.
Well, it's
Well, I'm probably right about it because the first principles are such that the limbs need a place to go. Now, the fact that they are going somewhere, there's all sorts of reasons why the feet are trying to go somewhere, but they still
Mhm,
have to have somewhere to go.
mhm.
And this is
I
not
mean,
in violation of anything else we've been taught.
when even making that transition to from one series of footfalls to another that has a different uh, rhythm or is in a different order requires the horse, whether there's a rider there influencing it or not, slowing feet, speeding feet in order to change that rhythm. And horse moving their own body, you can have your horse loose in the round corral and without driving them, just your energy opening up space by saying come through here, the horse, depending on their mind connecting to the thought that you have and the timing of your opening the space, if you're not mushing them into it, their mind latching onto that idea, arranging that idea, whether it be fear of being mushed into it or just their internal desire to get it right, is going to cause them to awkwardly arrange or casually and easily arrange moments later when it's easier to get themselves there. Or they go, well, I know this is the goal, but I've been on the inside shoulder a little more. So, how do I arrange myself to get into the correct lead, even though I'm not perfectly arranged to make that transition right now? Person in the way or not, the horse is making adjustments, not necessarily figuring out how to get into that lead, but making adjustments to given the whole totality of the situation and their desire, emotions, the degree to which they can feel compelled from outside forces or internal forces to get there is going to dictate how smooth or not smooth that might be, as well as physical abilities and limitations and braces in their own body or braces against, you know,
Feeling safe, not
yeah,
feeling safe, reacting to the
yeah,
external environment, being drawn by a herd. Like there's a bazillion things.
yeah.
Okay, let's read these comments just real quick. Uh Corey says, I think it's easy for the human mind to get cluttered. Yeah, sadly true. So maybe the person's level of awareness gets cloudy compared to the horse. For sure. That's like saying, oh, the 80-year-old, his mind is deteriorating compared to the 3-year-old. It's like, no, it just has, I mean, maybe, but not necessarily. Could just have more crap in there. Um, Corey, so analyzing mechanical details of actions we don't even notice, minute early details are cues, and we focus on the later details. This is exactly right. And then so then we just layer on top of this. This is my wonderings right now, is like, yes, we have to have a way to show the horse the open space mentally. Like, where should you go? And this is where the lining out, this is where I'm just saying, well, can't the lining out, like at walk and trot in particular, just be the handiest way to teach a flying change? If you get that so in in you and your horse's deal, then okay, well, if you're cantering, then you just draw them in the new, and if everything is perfect and you haven't met, this is so important as I'm working towards these flying changes with a new set of horses. I can do it in a few different ways, right? And it's like, okay, well, I want to really think about how I'm going to do it on this set because I have the opportunity to, think about things differently, right? So, but we still have to say, oh, there is a rectangle. But this is, again, if we think, you guys, we think about having the horse find the center of the rectangle. Why is it valuable? Why is it not valuable? How do we describe it? How do we not describe it to the horse? Are we driving the horse past the inside of the rectangle, or are we just defining the outside of the rectangle? Are when we ask, let's just say when we ask for a hindquarter yield, let's imagine we have first method of yielding the hindquarters, reins and legs together. What are we doing? Are we asking the horse to turn loose off the rein? Yes. And are we asking the horse to step away from the inside leg? Yes. But how much do we think about opening the space to the other side of the leg?
Mhm.
And this is very, or I mean, and the other side of the hindquarters, or above the outside front foot. Like these are just, if we open those, you guys, I know that this is what you're feeling because this is why I'm saying about a first principle. And Lisa says, Benny hates the outside leg during canter departs. Hates, hates, hates. He looks at me like, what the hell is that outside leg doing? Yeah. I was thinking about it's so funny. I'm just gonna die. Oh, I want you to practice with it, Lisa. It's so hilarious. Because I mean, I wonder if Benny's gonna have the same reaction. Now, here's the thing: Novella used to kick out at my outside leg, and that's not appropriate. It's like, look, you still need to follow the guide of the outside leg. You can't just, if the canter depart is hard, you can't just like be pissed because you can't wash out by the outside leg. No,
Yeah.
but I'm be very curious whether Benny is more interested in drawing forward and up into that. I'm sure you do that to some degree, right? Maybe that's all you do at this point. And Julie says, if you want to play around with the changes, I'll volunteer Scarlett for your experiments. Ah, so Julie, what I hear you saying is you're volunteering yourself and Scarlett because clearly I can't do it with Scarlett. So maybe you should do it with Scarlett. So those are my thoughts. Michael, does that make sense? Explaining the changes concept of like, well, why does it matter? Why do you care? Are you overthinking it? Is this hurting your ability to do, the thing? It's like, yeah, but I mean, I guess if I was just gonna be satisfied with like, I'm not
I,
satisfied with the.
I suppose it's if, the part I'm taking umbrage with is the degree to which the focus on quantifying it and measuring it replaces or inhibits the feeling around and allowing, um, which it shouldn't, or just slows down either the synapses in your presentation because you're thinking about each component rather than feeling
That will.
it, or speeds up or
Sure.
slows down your progress on a whole because you're not allowing yourself to feel it and discover it that way versus, you know intellectually pursuing, you know okay, I understand it now. Now I will work toward feeling it, which is, or seeing it or perceiving it. Is one more efficient moving forward than the other if we're talking about progress over time as a horseman trainer, human with your horse. So,
So tell me how you think like because I would totally agree with you. The most important thing is to feel around and to let your
mhm,
subconscious do its thing. There's no question about. I'm not disagreeing with that at all.
yeah.
But observing, and I feel so grateful to be able to take care of my own horses and to watch them all the time, you know, because I'm observing and collecting data regarding how it all works without being involved. Same sitting at a buck clinic, watching him ride, watching the horses go around. I can sit there and have thoughts. I shouldn't make him as crazy as I do. Sorry about that. Because it's not on him to have my wonderings like indulged,
Mhm.
because he's happy with what he's got going on. Sometimes he's interested, and that's fine. I really need to. And I was thinking, I know I probably did say this to you, but it's like, look, I've got to go to the lab and fiddle. It shouldn't be on anyone else to validate or shortcut that part of it. It's not even possible, really.
Run
You know,
or run the
the
experiment for you.
which I would love in a lot of cases. I would love it for Buck to take one of my ideas, and because I mean, who would you rather? Be like, hey, can you collect this data for me really quick? Because I know, like, so many other things are going to be just perfect, but eh, you
Yeah.
know, so, but that's not really where it's at. But I would agree with you 100% in the sense that, the feeling it in the moment. And Corey, it's the same thing. It's like, that's why the saying is, do your feeling during the day and your thinking at night. And that's what I am talking about. But then
Mhm.
once you come up with a premise or have figured something else out, what's wrong with adjusting for the next
Mhm.
day or testing a theory?
Yeah.
What do you guys think? Julie, I have so many horses. It would be very interesting to do it with Scarlett. Looking at her, I don't know. I'll play with it because maybe I'll be like, nope, this way, this is not, I can't even make a flying change at all. But it doesn't really make any sense to me if I'm watching these, unless I'm really in the way. Like if the horse gymnastically can't even carry me or the saddle, or, it's just like everything is just, they can't even move, or they're so bound up mentally and emotionally. Like, okay, well, I can see why that's not a thing. But just watching it all happen, it's like I don't see why that's not possible. So I'll work on it and report back because maybe it's not possible, but I certainly can't envision in this moment why it wouldn't be. But it really changes how I will approach the situation. Not in the sense that I'm suddenly going to mechanic everything around. That's not what I'm talking about. But I could
Mhm.
change my presentation. Yeah, so Julie says she does it without a rider. I'm the problem. Yeah, I mean, that's always the case, right? And but people take that on of like, oh, I'm such a bad writer, or I'm so in the way, or whatever. And it's like, yeah, I mean, yeah. But it's like we're trying to learn to operate together. A feel following a feel. That's the dream. So I don't know. I mean, she doesn't think of you as a problem, Julie. I could tell you that right now. But there's other places that we can play around with these ideas that don't require the horse to be managing our body into such a dramatic change in footfalls. Although, in my opinion, Michael, if they can walk canter, that is not harder than a flying change. I just cannot see. I could be wrong, but if that is significantly more challenging than a flying change. Unless I guess we were saying, okay, rebounding laterally is harder than pushing off forward. Except for when you watch a horse do a flying change, it's not allowed. They're
Yeah,
not out there like this. Like
exactly.
this parted. If you watch horses loose, and I'm not talking little,
It's just a change of direction, nothing more.
not even a change of direction.
Yeah,
They just do it straight. Like if they just change. Like if whatever if the terrain or what this, you don't have to do it on a change. They don't have to do it on a change
yeah,
of direction. So this whole thing of like, oh, we got to get this going on. Like, well, okay, yes, maybe all that's true just to get the idea across. What I hate, what I totally eschew though, Michael, is this idea that we're surprising the horse into a change or that we're pulling them off balance. So it's like, God, you talk about violating everything you've built with your horse.
hmm
So much cooler if we could just figure out how to like open the door and then follow them through it. Ugh, that would be way better. But you can't have the horse like doing this, freaking out about the change, or like how many times I've popped the horse in the with the outside rein, which is exactly the outside front foot has to go forward
hmm
into the right, you guys. So we're always obsessing about the new leading foot and blah blah blah. But it's like, yeah, I've blocked that outside front foot so many times. Obviously, that's the diagonal pair, so I've been screwing them over. Remember, Lil would get like this, because it's like if I let her do it on a longer range, she didn't have any problem because I wasn't in her way. She didn't have as much of a problem in a snaffle bit. But you put a bridle bit and you hold on to it, and she's like, God. Vivian. Anyway, we could go through all the horses and talk about all that, but I guess I'm just uh, applying. This is again a perfect situation of like when we are applying these first principles that we're observing in the horse during all. We don't have to be doing something super fancy to start to understand how we can develop these things or work within these things.
hmm
But sometimes it's not until you start putting together something much more technical that you start to be like, oh, I got to get this stuff straight.
hmm
And the other component of this, Michael, and I'm glad I remembered to say this, the other component of this process of thinking for me is just continuing to have a profound respect and awe as to what the horse will do i- in spite of it totally going against their balance and their nature for the person.
hmm
You know, it's just amazing. So Julie says, I'm sure green at cantering, so I don't have good timing or feel at canter. That plus her issues make, yeah, maybe, Julie, maybe. Or maybe you guys just haven't really messed it up yet. The other thing about a canter depart, Michael, I was thinking, like halt canter, walk canter, trot canter. There's an element of being able to hold the outside rein that you can and should do for the depart I think you really cannot do that in the flying change.
Yeah.
That's why you're going to get them sooner than me, especially if you play around with this, just because you're braver than me. So this is important because you will allow them to leap forward into the space, whereas I'm a little bit more nervous about that. I
hmm
was just Katniss the other day, and she gets ready to make the leap. Now she's thinking sometimes she thinks, oh, should I slow down to get my feet changed? I mean, how would she know? But that's exactly how you end up with this bucking change is because the horse slows down, then they got to shift you to the new outside foot, and then they have to go forward. Right. Versus if she just understood, like, just keep going forward. But she kind of was because I was late, whatever the deal was, when I was like, "Up, up, 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 don't do it that way." I think it's a benefit to us, her and I, just because she still can. I don't see any reason that I have to let it become a leapy change, a leapy
Yeah.
bucky change.
Well, I mean, when you say it could be the horse is just you're in the way, and that's where it results in that. You know, when they're off on their own doing it, and it's just this like, well, that was nothing. We're lined out. We're going somewhere, whether it be because we were going here, now we're gonna change and go there, change a direction, or like you said, just a hole
Look the
that they're
other way.
avoiding. Yeah, or whatever, or the slope of the ground is changing, so I'm gonna flop leads to the other way, and so I'm not awkwardly trying to lope this incline on a lead that's not conducive to it. So whatever the case might be, when you are placing matter, defining a curve, defining a length or of the rectangle, a space within which their body can operate, and they're moving their own body, you know, there is a lot of experimentation, or can be, going on within the horse of, okay, doing it within these parameters, like this, like that. I haven't done it within these parameters before. And even if you're not in their way per se, they're doing it. Same as they're doing anything. They're doing it bearing your weight. So I I guess I say that to say there is still a component of them figuring it out, because the
Now he's frozen. Oh, I thought he was thinking. Dang. Okay, well, you guys, and when he gets back, we'll wrap it up because we're super long on time. I'm glad I had so much built up, and he was on vacation, so I didn't even get to talk to him very much. Okay,
Am I
let's
here
see.
now?
Yeah, you're here.
Okay. Um yeah, I said like two words beyond it. What were they now? Beyond being frozen. I think I just restated the last thing I said, perhaps clearer. But no.
Well, the trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Oh,
The
so the horse trying to figure it out is it.
See, here's my
There
premise.
is still a bit of truth to that. Not like I
Yeah.
have to figure out how to make a change or how to rearrange my feet. Okay, that's something
Hmm.
they do all the time. But within these parameters, they are still going without you necessarily being in their way, in the sense of I'm in the way of you doing what I'm trying to communicate for you to do. That's often the case. Reins, seat, balance, leg, whatever, all of that. But even if all of that were ideal, there may still be, the horse moving their own body and figuring out where in the heck do I need to position myself to make the change in within these parameters.
But think about it, Michael. Think about the first ride. Like, it's pretty seamless if you get the horse prepared mentally and emotionally. Walk, trot, canter, turn, slow down, back up. When you think like those things for a horse are just as hard as a flying change.
Yeah.
So, and this is part of
And
my
yet
premise.
you're not, I don't know. You're not with that cold gathering them up.
But that's my whole point. Maybe you don't need to.
Maybe you don't need it. Yeah.
Watch these horses every single day. And it's like, oh, either the horse has to be galloping or they have to have enough collection and suspension to make the change. And all I'm saying to you guys is I'm looking at my horses every freaking day and they don't do that.
They
They
are
don't get
more.
all like
Yeah.
they don't get all bunched up and they're not going 1,000 miles an hour and they're not doing the prep. Hop, hop, hop. I have to have enough suspension to get to the no,
Yeah.
no. There's just not. and just like blah blah blah. So what if that were true? Is all I'm saying. And you think about horses like Hope, River. They're so green.
Hmm.
They don't know, oh, we're only doing things like this, and I've developed you to this level of collection, and now I'm going to add a movement. Kind of like, you get your horse broke to all these things, and then 2 years later you take a rope down and they're like, what the hell?
Hmm.
Well, you present it
Right.
on the first day or two and they're like, sure.
Hmm.
So I'm thinking of
It
you
it would
starting
be it would be so great to be able to just watch Ray start colt
no,
after colt after colt after colt, because that's what he did. I mean, from what I understand, what's been described to me, I mean, he that's what he'd do. He'd just be riding that right off the bat.
including the flying changes.
Yeah,
And I'll guarantee you he's not collecting that
yeah.
horse, a baby horse, or galloping it over a pole or something. No, he was just fucking around with it until, and opening this door and closing this door and letting them flow along. And then pretty soon, but you understand my premise, Michael. It's kind
Mhm.
of like, a horse like or a mule, let's say Feather, being worried about the saddle pad. And I'm just thinking, I got her out of the wild, and the reality of me putting a flag over her back is worse than her learning how to have a saddle thrown over. So if we ratchet back, this is a
Why is
me
that?
well, because she was totally wild. She had no framework for trusting anything.
Well, the saddle over her back just the same, except that you've prepared her by
That's what I'm saying.
the
Is it
initial flag over her back.
That's right.
But if you'd started with a saddle, the saddle would be just as terrifying.
Right.
Yeah,
That's right. But
yeah,
I'm just saying, if she learned that, be like trusting me enough to walk up to her to halt
yeah.
her. Why can't she deal with the rest of it? Of course she can. The-
Hmm.
So the same premise when it comes to the flying change, or even like novella with the piaf,
Hmm.
depending on the day.
Well, the wild thing on that, the flying change is more natural to that horse than the flag being up over their
Think
back.
about
I
that.
mean, that's pretty wild. It's like,
That
oh man,
flying change.
how inept am I that I'm, you know, unable to communicate something they just do, but I can clumsily get them used to these things that aren't a part of their world, which I
Yeah,
guess,
and this idea that, oh, it's so much harder because they have to balance you for the flying change. It's like, they learned how to canter around. How is that? How is that harder?
yeah. And it all depends. I mean, or this is thinking of Ray, starting these Colts and it just being right there. It all does depend on locomotion forward and the hind end operating and how you have them moving from the start and how lined out are they, how free are they forward.
The front end,
Um,
open and free, and carrying
and
their.
and active with the hind end propelling any of that, because that can't be open and free without the horse moving somewhere. And that's just like, there's not a world in which Ray or Buck is riding horse forward and not having it powering from behind. The movement coming from behind that opens up the ability to have this happening right off the bat, or developing it in time or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, makes sense, the idea of it being right off the bat. So,
We'll see. Some of it restricted by how much space you have. I think in terms of how lined out you can be.
so
So
want to see something fun as we wrap up.
yeah,
Totally unrelated. So Lydia came in and it's going to be backward, but she wrote me this note, which
Dad.
says, "Can I sharpen my pencil or will it be too loud?" Which is just adorable. The pencil sharpener's like a room and a half away, but she wanted to make sure sharpening her pencil would not be too loud to disrupt us. I thought that was like the cutest thing ever.
That's adorable. For the
No.
show. Oh
Yeah.
my. That is adorable.
No. Anyway,
Okay, any final thoughts, you guys? Yes, no, bad, first principles, stupid, like what? I think everybody's going to realize why I need a year off to think and practice, right? Imagine if this is what's in my head, right? So the best little human, I know, Chelsea, agree. Oh my lord. All right, well, see how much this is what happens when you're gone for a week. Look how behind we are.
I'll have to go back and listen to what you talked to yourself about last week.
I don't,
Just kidding. I know she was talking to all of you. Were there a lot of comments where were they
yes,
all like you're crazy or
yeah,
you're right on or
I don't remember what I talked about. So, Chelsea, so much to think on. Yay, good. Eva. Yeah, Eva, if you care about me at all, this is what adults call say pressure. Okay, so I'm teasing. I'm honestly teasing. What I'm really trying to say is I would be very interested in how you have these pennies dropping as you go along. It's a different data set, Eva, right? Than what Michael and I have. So, Susan, gonna hurt all day now. Yeah, welcome to my world. Thank God it's spring. I'm so glad it's not November right now. Hey. So, um, anyway, any of you guys that have little bits to this, and Michael, this is a huge part of it. It's like, this is not a matter of like, oh, I'm right and you're wrong. And sometimes just whatever a person's experiment is coming back with is super interesting.
mhm,
And that gives data points. And so we go back to a horse is a horse. And yes, the curriculum works. And that's one interesting thing about reading some of the books. Is you're like, oh, yeah, what we do, how we do it, especially particularly separating the hindquarters from the front quarters, how we spread the shoulders out, how we get the horse lined out, like, the soundness with which that develops a horse physically is pretty incredible, so long as you're letting them move their own body, which is a principle I still can't figure my way out of it all. um so I would be curious. There's only so many hours in the day, so if you guys experiment too, that would be helpful, and Michael will get his changes, and then I'll stab him in the night. But instead of that, I'll just try to be grateful for the data that he can provide. You guys that know Rooster, if Rooster gets really confident just flowing forward, right? And Michael can just teach him that whenever he opens the space forward and through, that he just steps forward with that diagonal pair. Michael, you have to think about making your canter depart with the inside hind leg, even though that's not really the case. But that's the change, right?
mhm,
So yes, you're going to sit on the outside hind leg, but the deal is opening the door for the inside hind leg. And then so long as he's balanced coming around the curve, and so like a big open diagonal, or it doesn't even matter. You could do it anywhere. So long as he's on all 4 feet, give it a try. And then the other thing I was thinking I got to think about is like, what do I do when it doesn't go right? Like when, let's say they thought about the change, but they didn't make the change, which is always more annoying when you're riding in a small space. But I think depending on how feely the horse is in the moment and how much they're trending in my direction, I think what I'm just going to do is put my leg back and start again.
mhm,
Versus like, oh, now we have to drop to trot and change. It's like, maybe if they're totally clueless. But if I wait until they're kind of trending my way and really feeling around, because you know how, like, you guys, when you do the aviator pattern, or when you really have your horse lined out, they're going forward and into whichever direction you're wanting them to go, right? Like, there's definitely a vacuum kind of a feeling. So I think if the horse, if you were thinking, okay, well, I'm just going to suck them forward for, in other words, suck the new inside hind leg more forward. That's all there is to it, and you got to give room for the new outside front foot. But if they don't make it, then how would you do it? Well, you would just push your foot back, set it up again, and that's it. But and of course, the enemy of all of this is retarding forward speed. But you don't want to. This is again the value of, like, where you are with Rooster right now, is if he can get so comfy in the canters and in the canter departs, and he knows he's going to go and then walk and go and then walk, then he's, because if he were to get too gallopy, then that's not going to work, because then he's going to be looking for four beats, and you're like, well, that's definitely going to mess up the deal. So to the same degree that a horse would, like, just go faster in trot to make a canter depart, you're like, no, 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 it's not that. It's not. And you might have to block that and be like, okay, that's not. What else could it be? What else could it
No.
be? You know. So Eva says the amount of possible clarity that I know. This is a great way to say it. Can I just have to screen capture that real quick? Yeah, Eva, precisely the part that was like, well, why does it matter? It's like, oh, come on, how cool could this be? Maybe. And Buck's like, oh, you need it. You're going down the wrong road. I'm like, maybe. I respect you very, very much. The amount of possible clarity that I know is reachable hearing you talk in my own mind is both exciting and happily frustrating at the same time. Right. It is a good point. Before I read your next comment, I think it's a good point, and so that could be a pitfall. But I have to tell you, Michael and I have both lived through the friction of that, right, Michael? Where we're like,
Wait, what's the potential pitfall?
just being frustrated
Oh,
because you
no.
know it could be more clear.
Yeah.
But here's my premise
She's at least saying happily frustrated rather than my tone of being like, oh, this is frustrating, which
it
isn't
was so.
exactly a happy frustration.
I'll tell you guys what happened to me, because I was doing a lot of clicker training before I met Buck. I was maybe on the tail end of it. So the thing is, if you're using a clicker and a treat to train a horse, you will learn how fast they can learn stuff. Okay. So then my problem was when I had to rely on my feel to give them information. Oh, it was like, oh, it was awful. And you just had to live through it. But here's my question for you guys as you're practicing, doesn't matter what you're doing or how advanced your horse is. If you start to really think about the open door more intentionally, what will happen? So Eva says there's just so much information, and so many levels and dimensions and feelings to play around with and hope I'll find. Yeah, good thing you have lots of time, huh, Eva? Yeah, for sure. More positive frustration. Yeah, I would agree. And like my feeling is like, oh, I want to know it all, which is why I don't want to do anything else right now.
Well, yeah, I was just thinking back to defining of words. Frustration, you know, can be an emotional reaction, but frustration can also be, you know, devoid of emotion, and things are frustrating the progress, things are impeding the progress. So if we go with that
I think
kind of connotation of frustrating, it doesn't have to be a negative thing. It can be a just a reality,
what
a non-emotional reality, a reality of there are things impeding. If we anyway,
yeah, and I
I'd have
think
to look up the definition of frustrating, but I'm guessing it doesn't necessarily have an emotional component.
we'll have to look that up. I don't.
Yeah.
I would have said automatically that it has a negative. but perhaps not.
Well, it has a negative component in terms of there being something frustrating the progress or impeding the progress, but can it be a definition of impeding, which is, you know,
Oh, sure. Yeah, I
something
see.
in the way, but without an emotional component
Mhm.
or a
And
necessarily negative emotional component.
and the biggest secret is like be frustrated with yourself or how long it's taking you to figure something. Never be frustrated with your horse.
Yeah.
Eva, I know that you know that too, but that's for sure. Like the horse can hang with a lot if they know it's not, if they're not in trouble, if something bad didn't happen to them or your relationship is crushed or whatever. It's like, oh, I can't believe this, you know, and that sure goes a long way. So the lightheartedness, Buck and I were talking about this in our little thing we did for the insiders. It's like, um, one of the biggest things that him being the eternal optimist, fostering a sense of lightheartedness. And he's like, I wasn't always like that. Yeah. But, since we've been around, it's like, yeah, let's joke around a little bit. So, in spite of being frustrated, at least we can all make a comedy special out of it, you know,
Yeah.
causing
Lead,
annoyance or upset, inability to change or achieve something. Oh, yeah.
lead up,
But
goddamn.
that's the one we want to hold on to, right? The annoyance. We can be humorously annoyed at ourselves, right?
Yeah.
I'm definitely not annoyed or actively upset, right? I didn't figure you were. It's like it's like having a Christmas present that you really want to open and you have to wait. Something like that, you know? Anyway, there can be a lot of joy in it too, right? Because the discovery part, and who was I saying? Oh, I think I was saying this to Mark and Wendy, and Michael knows this about me. You guys probably do too. It's like the not knowing, which is the whole point about Christmas. It's like the anticipation of finding out is the best part, you know?
Which is
Oh,
interesting because for some people, Levi being the prime example, looking forward to something you know of is far more pleasing and enjoyable and relaxing than looking forward to an unknown,
yeah.
not knowing, you know, what the unknown will be, causing some measure of discomfort, you know, around that anticipation.
Yeah, pretty funny. All right. Well, we better go. My phone is draining battery like pretty amazingly fast here. So that means we've been going a long time.
Yeah, I
For the
think we've been at this for like 2 hours and some.
2.5 hours. Yeah. Well, serves you right for missing a show. Uh okay. Well, anything else?
Oh,
All right. Well, thanks for being with us, you guys. Michael and I will see you next Thursday morning at 6:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
8:30 Central.
Bye everybody.
Have a good week.